And here at the EV Reality Check space in every single city for Electrify Expo, we are talking about what happens in the world of electrification that makes it happen. So we're talking to people that are kind of behind the curtain, where the sausage is made. That's policy, that's energy, that's automotive, that's charging. But also it's a space for you to come and rest your feet in the shade, charge your phones, listen to the conversation, also ask questions if you'd like to. And in every city, I am joined by a partner in crime. And here in Seattle, that is Dan O'Shea.
I am happy to be the co-host of the EV Reality Check stage. I've been in Seattle for, I don't know, some 30-some years. I've been an EV charging consultant since 2010, which is kind of a very niche thing to be doing. And I've seen everything from, you know, the smallest chargers to the biggest megawatt chargers for cars, trucks, even airplanes. And ferries. So very happy to be here talking about all things electric.
It's going to be a fun conversation here. We have Ethan Esch from ICF. So ICF is one of those companies that I've heard of, that Dan's heard of, but many of you may have never heard of them because they're, again, behind the curtain, right, making things happen. So Ethan, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt and Dan. ICF, or Inner City Fund, and we support Seattle City Light and other utilities across the nation, actually. But for me personally, I'm focusing on Seattle City Lights program, making sure that we get as many chargers in ground as possible here in Seattle and support the community.
So, I mean, we've talked to a lot of folks that are on the front lines here in Washington. We've talked to utility folks, some other policy people. So, ICF, you guys work nationally, but again, to your point, here in the Washington area, but obviously specifically with Seattle City Light, what exactly do you guys do to help them get the charging infrastructure deployed on their behalf?
Seattle is actually a great place to be if you're interested in EVs. Seattle City Light offers a lot of great support, and ICF implements their program. So we have our fleet electrification program where we offer complimentary assessments. We have multifamily charging where we can offer up to 100% coverage of cost to make sure that everyone gets to take advantage of this electrification journey. So making sure that multifamily homes and people have chargers there and they're paid for.
Do you guys also work on, City Light has fast charging around town too. Is that a program that you've been involved in?
That is. We actually have the public charging program manager right over there, Kim Latham. So afterwards, if you want to bug her, feel free. But yes, public charging is one of the focuses we have, and we are working really hard. And our public charging here is actually some of the best. I used to work for Rivian in Arizona. I've worked for Lucid as well, driving EVs all over the country. And some of the cheapest energy can be found here. Not only is it cheap, but it's all hydropower. So cheap and efficient.
Yeah, cheap and clean. Well, that's an important factor too. Is EVs and Washington, they kind of go hand in hand. There's been a lot of, again, progressive efforts to make that happen. But I think what you're pointing out too is the basics. What does someone need to know about all the efforts you guys are making? And if they're filling up with electricity here in the state of Washington, you can fill up, again, an entry-level EV that's kind of like, Model 3 or something like that for, $10 at home or less.
Oh, yeah. I have a family and kids, so for my lifestyle choice, previously working for Rivian, I got an R1S. And I always like to say that it's about $20 to $25 to fill it up, which is significantly less compared to my old SUVs. I was into rock crawling. I'm paying $110, $105 to fill up versus $25 with more horsepower, regen braking, and all the benefits that come with the cost saving for maintenance.
So how exactly, where does your EV journey start? So you've been with Rivian, you've been with Lucid, you're with ICF now. So some of these are public-facing brands people have heard of, obviously ICF being more, again, behind the curtain. So what is your story for what got you into EVs?
So I am a veteran, and when I got out, I was very curious. We actually had the Electrification Coalition come and talk to some veterans, and I was really interested in the message they were sending. So I reached out to Rivian, who was testing their vehicles actually at the proving grounds where I was returning from my service in Phoenix. And I said, hey, you guys need any help? And I actually ended up being one of the first 2,000 employees helping out. And then from there, I worked for Lucid here in Seattle. And that's when I got the opportunity to work for ICF. And as you mentioned, working more behind the scenes and not as much on the sales side now, but more on the program and helping the community with that mission of getting chargers.
So what are the most important things that utilities need to do around EV charging infrastructure? Like if a utility was coming to you and they're for their customers and they're in their service area, like what would ICF recommend as the top 3 things that would be the best things for a utility to do?
One, engage the utility as soon as possible and make sure that they're in the know. Oftentimes we're working with vendors, they talk about slow wait times for engineers or different things. The sooner you get us involved, the faster it is. ICF, as you mentioned, we're working behind the scenes to help support and push that process through. It's all a new field, and with our our political environment right now, things are constantly changing, so that's why it's the best just to keep the utility in the know. So we can help you with those incentives and stack them with other available incentives at the federal level as well as the state level.
Well, part of that, too, is a lot of these programs that are developed out by utilities, they actually have to file to get these things done. They don't just kind of willy-nilly go, we're just going to go build some chargers. So the utilities that are all planning this out, I mean, they plan and project 10, 15, sometimes 20 years into the future for what they need to be doing for product, what they need to be doing for transmission. So everybody that is on the receiving end of that can just kind of breathe easy and it just works. We've kind of had it that way for a long, long time. But with electrification of transportation, we're really kind of throwing a new element into their planning stages that is really they're not controlling all of it. They get a sense to produce the energy, but how that electricity is then used is far more varying from what they've seen for load, as they've called it, for years and years.
I think a lot of that is also educating the community on how to best utilize that energy.
Yeah.
You're going to have different, depending on where you're at, there's going to be time of charge. Some's going to cost more versus less with the demand on the grid. I think it's just very important to engage the utility as early as possible, though. That's going to be the key thing.
Well, education is something that, I mean, Expo exists for that, is to give people a chance to come and test drive cars, see what's out there. But also, this is, again, the EV Reality Check booth is about that, is to say, well, we're going to answer those questions. So one of the things that we hear oftentimes is that the grid can't take it. Like, the grid is not going to be able to support all this stuff. But in truth, the way that you fill up an electric car, depending on, especially if you're a homeowner, you're actually not putting that much load on the grid if you're filling up at home. It's really about how are we improving on power distribution for faster charging that's outside of the home.
Not only that, but I also think that it's interesting how as technology gets better, that draw of energy is going to go down, going from NMC to LFP batteries. And as you mentioned, the amount of time you're charging at home. For me, myself, I'm driving maybe 40 miles into the city and back. I plug in it as soon as I get home, don't even think about it. And that draw on the grid is going to be minimal with that amount of mileage that I'm adding. Yeah,
I think most people have that kind of sense in their head of just like, well, how far does this car go? It can go 300 miles on a charge. Okay, so I need to be able to do that every night. Are you a traveling salesman? Like, what is it you do every day? And so that's part of just the rethinking of how people have thought about how they need to access fuel. Because let's be honest, getting gas, there's never been a convenience factor to it because you have to go get it. So for half of America that has a home, the convenience factor changes immediately to say, I don't have to go anywhere most of the time.
They did a good job by calling them convenience stores.
Well, the store part was, I guess, I'm here, I guess I'll get a cookie and a soda or something, but no, I think that convenience factor is people perceive gas as convenient because it's ingrained into how car ownership works. But in reality, the way that electricity as a fuel works provides new conveniences.
It's even more convenient. You're charging at home.
Yeah.
My kids don't even know what a gas station is. For how long they've been alive long enough to see me not go to a gas station driving my EV. So it's a great experience. And as far as having it available, it's at my house. I'm sleeping. Same thing as a cell phone. So it's a great experience as far as convenience goes.
I had to take my daughter who's in college thinking that she would be driving around with friends. And I'm like, I'm going to take you to a gas station. At the time, we had a gas car, a hybrid plug-in. And I'm like, you're going to have to fill it. She goes, I'll figure it out. I'm like, you won't. You've only ever plugged in at home. She learned to drive on a Leaf. And so I took her there, and I said, you get out and do it. And she's like, I can't. Like, she tried. I'm like, all right, I'll show you. And then she's like, that was disgusting, and I'm never doing it again.
I'm glad they put federal laws in place, though, to help stop the confusion at those EV chargers. Like, some you're doing tap and pay, some you have to download an app. I think just since January 1st now, they all are required to have tap and pay to help with that ease. And I know that Electrify America has deals with Lucid, so it's literally just plug in and charge now.
The plug and charge is critical, right?
Well, the intelligence that exists within EV charging that brands like Tesla have pioneered, which is you just basically set everything up in the background. The software does the work for you by sake of the fact you just pull up, plug in, you're filling up. And I think that the way that the infrastructure was deployed for the last 10 years, there was a lot of just patchwork about how the experience would work. So it's nice to know that the people that are, again, writing the regulations and policies are saying, we need to keep this easy for everybody. And the easiest thing is you have a credit card or a debit card, then you're good to go. And that's really how it should be. So in that respect, I mean, for ICF's perspective, there's a lot of things that you help unpack on behalf of utilities. It's not just charging. There's a lot of things that you guys, I'm sure, offer for services. So what do you think the challenges that exist still today for utilities where there's a lot of improvement that still needs to be made for how they can bring electrification to the world easier?
Definitely the cost of ownership, total cost of ownership. I still get questions about that consistently, which is why we still offer a complimentary fleet assessment to give them a full picture of what we're offering and the cost savings that are available. I think I mentioned it earlier, as companies move away from nickel-based batteries and cobalt-based batteries, you're seeing a 20% drop in prices. I know you have Slate, you have Tilo, other trucks like that are coming in below 30,000. So there are utility vehicles, especially in Seattle, where it's a little tighter spaces, need smaller vehicles. The prices are coming down. There are vehicles that can meet the needs of the fleet and save money.
I ran into that when doing fleet assessments for people at various jobs, and the fleet drivers were convinced they needed that F-350 or that Sierra truck to do their job, and as it turns out, a lot of them didn't. And trying to get them into one of those old school Leafs was virtually impossible.
Well, that's the automotive branding of America right there. I mean,
my favorite thing was to bring my Rivian and put them in that, and instantly you'll see that the torque, in most vehicles now, GMC, Chevy, they're all catching up now with longer range, more towing capacity.
Oh, yeah.
Over 11,000 pounds towing capacity. Seattle City Light's using Ford Lightnings to power street lights and other things where you're not utilizing noisy generators anymore. So a lot of it is letting them use those vehicles and get to experience them and all the benefits that come with it that isn't in ICE.
And for the workers too, like when bucket trucks are coming out, right? And so no generators late at night. And for the workers, they're not breathing in diesel. And right now the buckets are electric, but the trucks are going to be electric. It's just good for the drivers and the workers.
For the workers, 100%, and that's what I like to focus on. Me personally, coming from my military background, I was always next to the really loud generators, working on aircraft or different military vehicles. Being able to see Seattle City Light utilize vehicles now to save the hearing of their employees, utilizing those generators, huge win for everyone. Glad you mentioned it.
There's all these little fringe benefits that kind of come out of electrification. You're not actively thinking about it, but it turns into that. Oh, yeah, you know what? I can go to work and not be in earplugs and deaf all day. That's really great. So I think kind of rounding out, I mean, with respect to ICF's work here in Seattle, what else is coming down the pipeline that might be important for the public to know that there's things being done to set the stage for what's going to be a more enjoyable electric vehicle experience?
I would say one deadline coming up that I would want to hit on is September 30th. I know that we're talking about the cost of vehicles and how we can save money. One of the biggest things available right now is the tax credit or the credits available. Specifically leasing. You can now get a Hyundai Ioniq for under like $179 utilizing that fleet incentive. So I would highlight that as a specific date coming down the pipeline. If you have a fleet or individual wanting to own and take advantage of that lease, I would take advantage of that before those deals go away, because right now it makes it a very, very smart financial move to lease those vehicles. And as we mentioned, technology, the way it's advancing so fast, might be better to lease in this situation anyways.
I agree with that. One of the other things I wanted to chat about is that the workforce development opportunities in electric vehicle charging. I think that City Light is going to be trying to get more people trained and to have a more sort of on-call service capacity. I mean, not just City Light, but all the utilities that I talk to. One of the challenges is, can we get a tech out there tomorrow? And getting service, the training of the techs, whether they're utility employees or they're turnkey contractors, that's a challenge. It's a workforce development opportunity, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think it's going to take both, and it's funny you mentioned that. Part of our transportation electrification portfolio includes our EVC IP program, which is we help WIMBY contractors get certified. It's contractors from your community who know where you want chargers, who we are helping put in front of manufacturers, learning about specific products and equipment, and then we're helping them get certified with EVITP and WIMBY certified, as well as putting them in front of different contractors to get those jobs. So education all around is a huge part. Community and contractors.
It's a whole other benefit of the electric vehicle revolution. Is there are these jobs available?
Oh yeah.
They're good paying jobs they can be. Some of them are super technical and some aren't. And it's just a wide range of them.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's a really important thing, and you kind of mentioned too, kind of like where the political wind is blowing and things that kind of get tossed around for narrative. At the end of the day, the way industry works and the way that the world works and the way economies work is it goes where the technology and advancements are going for innovation. And that's what this is. That's what Expo is showcasing. And so the state of Washington is still moving that forward. We're going to see that, obviously, cities like Seattle keep making that move happen. So these jobs are going to continue to be in need. So we're really, again, no matter what you might hear outside of the expo walls, there's a lot of this is moving forward at a pace that it's not going to stop.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to stop, especially with some of the new articles I'm seeing coming out on the longevity of EVs as well. The proof's in the pudding. One of my fellow colleagues, Joe Beres, just wrote an article where there's Hyundai Ioniqs going 360,000 miles in 3 years and needing a battery change.
That is a lot of driving.
That's a lot of driving. Yeah, it's a great article if you have a chance to check it out.
That's 2,500 miles a week. That's crazy. That is an insane amount.
Who is he running from?
It was a South Korean taxi cab. Hyundai Ioniq was testing them out. Two of them went 360,000 miles before they had to change out a battery. So I think it's speaking to the battery longevity, too, that we were hitting on.
No, he's in a witness protection program. I mean, that's really what this is. He's like, yeah, I'm a taxi driver.
Apparently it's not working.
This is totally working out fine for me. Yeah. Well, so for those of you again who are listening, if you can hear our voices, a free T-shirt awaits you here at the EV Reality Check booth powered by GreenCars.com. We're going to be talking to more industry professionals throughout the day that are helping making things happen, both on the front lines with brands you might have heard of, and also behind the scenes with companies like ICF that are making it happen. So, Ethan, Esch, thank you so much for coming by and letting us know your story.
Thank you, Dan.
Ethan.
Thank you, Matt.